conference. We talked about it months ago. We hadn't gotten around to it, but where you can order a book and have it shipped to your favorite congressperson or favorite NASA administrator or whatever you want. In fact, we should send some to Pete. Well, he actually wrote part of the book, so he'd have to read his own stuff, which I don't know. Of course, Pete wrote the Darth Vader stuff, how to create monsters on the moon, things like that. Fun chapter. Anyway, so check that out. We also are going to be doing our great auction that Mr. Busby, where is he? But I guess he's not here. And he's running for us. Jim now works over at X-Corp, so he's probably collapsed asleep somewhere knowing the way they work their people. I'm looking at you, Randall. Yeah, you know. So anyway, we're going to have a great auction at our banquet tomorrow night. If you're not registered to come to the banquet, do so. I am curious to see how many people show up in black ties and how many show up with those T-shirts with the black ties on them, being this crowd. I should point out that Courtney Stadd, who we're honoring, was one of the people who actually led the rebellion against the Goddard dinner black ties. And so we had a real interesting discussion. Say, Courtney, we're honoring you at a black tie dinner. He's like, do I have to wear one? Yes, Courtney. He's like, okay, I'll dust it off, and for you guys only. But we're going to do an auction. We're raising money for the Teachers in Program, which is a fantastic program being headed by Bill Boland, who I think, there he is, there's Bill. Great program. I will plug our, some of the people have stepped up. We've had X-Corp, Rocket Plane Kistler, and Armadillo have stepped up and offered free flights to teachers. We've had similar coming from, no, this hasn't gone public yet, but Maston and the folks who are doing the Red Arrow, I forgot the company's name, but they've also offered seats on their rockets, and we'll be rolling those out pretty soon. It's turning into a great project and a great program, and I urge anybody who has time, cash, or connections to talk to Bill Boland and plug into that. Also, bid very, very high tomorrow night. Drink lots of alcohol before the auction. One of the things, for example, that are going to be bid is something my company is putting up, and yes, God forbid I have a company, extreme company. It's called Orbital Outfitters. We're in the business of leasing spacesuits to suborbital passengers. And one of the things we're doing is Chris Gilman is our CEO of Global Effects. He just signed a contract with us to run that company with us. And one of the things he sent us, Chris, by the way, is in Sweden right now, dressing up like a Viking and beating the crap out of other people with swords, or he would be here. And I just wanted to show you this, and he takes this whole thing so serious. It's amazing. This is from the movie Space Cowboys, and was worn by Tommy Lee Jones. It's an exact mock-up, relatively exact mock-up of an outer glove from a space shuttle EVA outfit. This is the kind of items we're going to be auctioning off. This typically, I would gather, he said they were about $700 or $800 a pair to make. So the individual glove, just think about it, and you can have that framed, and maybe somebody could track down Tommy and get a signature for it. Or you could lie and say Clint Eastwood wore it, which, you know, I like Tommy Lee, but Clint Eastwood. You know, in fact, you didn't hear that first word. Clint Eastwood wore this glove. So anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker. We're kind of reaching out a little bit today. We're going for some new bloods. You've heard some of us way too much. And I I can bring my own heckler. Thank you. Mr. Wingo, one of these days, I'm going to pay somebody to heckle you. I do want to introduce our next speaker, and he is a brilliant gentleman who has gotten involved with the Council for the Positive Future. Was brought to us by Barbara Marx Hubbard, who had helped open up a lot of space activities in the 70s. A brilliant mind, someone who sees life as a voyage of exploration himself, and is started out in physics, has gone into psychology, sociology. He wanted to figure out how cultural movements are created. For example, how did Hitler get everybody excited and pumped up, and how do you create a social movement? So he dove into the rock and roll world and created an agency and helped create legends like Prince and people like that. As a physicist, running a promotion company for musicians, just to get a feel for how you could create cultural movements. And I really admire that kind of diving in there. His two most well books, and by the way, I'm not the only one who thinks he's a pretty sharp guy. People have compared him to Einstein and all kinds of folks like that. And his two best well-known books are The Lucifer Principle and The Global Brain, which is the evolution of the mass mind. And so without further ado, because I want to give him plenty of time to talk, because this is going to be a lot of fun, and pay attention, because this is outside opinions, and we need them more than you ever know. Without further ado, come on up. Howard Bloom.
Following Rick is not easy, and I don't know any jokes, so we're really in trouble here.
Until this morning, I don't either.
So we're flying blind, and I have no memory whatsoever. So if I remember what it is I want to talk to you about, it'll be a miracle. Test me at the end of this quiz. Give me a quiz and see if I remember anything I've said. I want to talk to you about four interrelated things. Again, if I can remember what in the world they are. One is the vision thing. Two is Bigelow's achievement. Three is a guy named Willie Ley. And four, if we get time for it, is your position in a 3.5 billion year, 3.85 billion year experiment called life. And all these things relate to each other. The vision thing goes like this. A people without vision will perish. That's from Proverbs. America is in one of the most dangerous positions it has been in. America is the leader of Western civilization. Western civilization means we get to be pluralists, we get to have a wide variety of opinions, we get to say words like fuck in a public place. We get a chance to exercise our passions and our intellects simultaneously and grapple with each other peacefully in battle and inspire each other in the process of opposing each other. There's a trick here. The Western world has lost its entire sense of meaning. It has no sense of a future. A nation, a civilization, needs a sense that there is a frontier ahead of it, that there is a paradise that it is entering, that through its labors, that paradise will be reached, if not by us, by our children, or our grandchildren, or their grandchildren. And when you lose that vision, you are dead. Western civilization is the only civilization that has ever produced the lifespan we've got, which is the equivalent of two of our great-great-great-great-grandparents' lifespan. It's the only civilization that has allowed us to take a look at this belt. Look at this. Electronic equipment all over the place. No such thing has ever existed, and every single one of these is a human power extender. It's the equivalent of what evolution, just one of these, is the equivalent of what evolution could spend 1 billion years working to construct. And every one of these things that I'm wearing has been invented during my lifetime. No civilization has ever done this before. We have the poor. The poor, they shall always be with us. The poor are poor because all they can afford are television sets and Nike sneakers. I mean, there are very few people, even the homeless, you will see carrying products that the emperors of Persia would have given their sorcerers daughters for. And yet they could never have had the things that the poor have today. And we're going to lose this all because of a loss of vision, because of a loss of a sense. We have the sense that we have come to the end of our civilization, that we have had our rise and now we have our decline and our fall, and that we deserve it. Why do we deserve to fall? Because we're that fucking rotten civilization that has made consumerism its primary goal in life. We are the me, 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 me culture. We are the imperialists who have downtrodden every single people we have walked across in order to get where we are. I'm sorry, this is not true. There have been imperialist civilizations. Take Islam, for example, which has been on a 1,400-year streak of imperialism. Its empire is 5 times the size of the Roman Empire and 7 times the size of the United States of America. Are we the greatest imperialists in history? Is Algeria, a Berber country, about to give up Islam? No way, Jose. They have been far, far more successful at imperialism than we have. And I could trot out a bunch of evolutionary biology to show you that what we think of as trivial consumerism, in the long run, keeps our civilization moving forward. We are constantly out for novelty. We are constantly out for something that will tickle our fancy. We get restless and bored very easily. That restlessness and boredom is our gift because it keeps us going after something new, which keeps the really creative people in our culture finding something new. Finding something new that has enough of an old context that we'll recognize it, but enough newness that it will snap us to attention and give us a thrill. And we are sitting here in a city of thrills of exactly that sort that tears its buildings down every 6 years because it needs to surprise us with new ones based on entirely new technologies. Well, it's through the technologies of the toys of a civilization and its trivialities and its jewelry that every major hard-nosed technological advance has taken place. So do not be ashamed of your frivolities. No, don't go overdosing on anything, and that includes consumerism. Anything in excess is a poison, and that's consumerism. But hey, when you want to buy something and you can't tell quite why, you are making a movement on behalf of the mass mind of Western civilization. So what does that have to do with any of the people in this room? Again, a people without vision shall perish. I've been introduced to the space community only over the last 3 months, thanks to Feng Shu, who's sitting over there and has been a senior risk analyst for NASA on the shuttle program, the International Space Station, and now on the Constellation program. And Feng and Paul Verbos at NSF have been my mentors. And Feng was the one who brought me to my first space conference just 2 months ago. But space is what turned me on when I was a little kid. Space was what turned me on to science when I was 10 years old. Feng brought me back to my roots. And what I've discovered is this is a wonderful community that for 15 to 25 years has been out there as hobbyists. And this year, the venture capital is coming in. And this year, it's no longer a hobby. This time, it's for real. The problem is, every civilization needs a paradise towards which it can direct its aspirations and its energies. Where is that paradise? There are several places. Several places. There are pieces of real estate of kinds we've never imagined before. How many people had heard of cyberspace before 1990? Cyberspace is a vast new piece of real estate we're only beginning to explore. So the only frontier is not space. There are other frontiers. There are other cyberspaces awaiting us in the realms of our imagination and our potential. But space is the big one. And we'll skip over a couple of stories and go to why space is the big one. We'll go directly to what you and I have to do with microorganisms as opposed to microorgasms. Yes, everybody take a minute now, 10 seconds, microorgasm. Okay. Finish? Good. Was it good for you as it was for me? Okay. The fact is that this is an incredibly creative cosmos. But this cosmos is a morally indifferent and morally reprehensible cosmos, that it often creates new things by killing old things off in violent ways. For example, the original generation of stars had only elements in them: hydrogen, helium, and lithium. Those stars, when they sprang to life, were something of a kind no one had ever seen. Not that there was anybody to see it, but that was inconceivable in the pre-star era. And then those wonders died. And they died the equivalent of agonizing deaths. And from that agony came 98 new forms of atomic nuclei. In other words, nature will use the most horrible disasters in order to get her way. And her way is always the next step up. Forget entropy. The universe is constantly climbing up. The people in this room are mere extensions of the cosmos. The proton, try doing this. Just poke your thumb. Okay, now, did your finger go through your palm and come out the other side? No. Why? What's stopping my finger from going through my palm? Protons that are 13.5 billion years old and have been through every disaster this cosmos has been able to throw at them. What does that mean? That means that each one of you and me, we are all the latest social dance that protons are trying out to see just how clever and just how new they can make new things. When we talk about ourselves being opposed to nature, the fact that we are raping and destroying our planet, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. The fact is that cyanobacteria had a bad habit of digesting everything they could, which was a wonder. They took the screams of stars, they took the screams of atomic nuclei dying in the heart of a star. Those screams were photons. And they turned those photons into DNA and cells. What a miracle. That's far beyond anything any of us will ever achieve in our lives. It's beyond an Albert Schweitzer, it's beyond an Einstein, it's beyond a Newton. It's an astonishing thing. And that experiment called life has now been going on for 3.85 billion years. And I and you are collections of 100 trillion, I always get my zeros wrong, but it's 100 trillion cells. And we're an agglomeration. We're not just a social agglomeration of photons, we're also a social agglomeration of the original cells in their own strange way. And 50 trillion of those cells don't even claim to be you and me. They're bacterial colonies. Bacterial colonies so thin that if they were on my palm, you couldn't see them. But a colony on my palm so thin that you couldn't see has 7 trillion bacteria. That's more than all the human beings who have ever lived, and they are operating of intelligence, doing research and development so fast that we can't keep up with them, which is why we're losing in the antibiotic wars right now. What does this have to do with space? We are cells, we are biomass's latest way of getting the hell off the surface of just this one measly, meager little planet and getting out to the rest of the solar system. And that is where our future lies. And that is where our paradise lies. Paradise is always incomplete. A paradise without hell would be hell, because the hells in paradise drive us to do new things, and that's what nature and evolution are all about. The difficulty is there is so much imagination in the space community that it defies belief. It really defies belief. And so much idealism defies belief. But there's so much squabbling that it doesn't defy belief, it's perfectly normal. Emil Durkheim, one of the founders of sociology, said take 12 saints and put them in a room together. And within 15 minutes, they will discover something that makes 6 of them different from the other 6. And they'll fight over it until finally they won't talk to each other anymore, and one group will try to exterminate the other. These are saints. So, I mean, bacteria, our ancestors from 3.85 billion years ago, they go through this kind of fission and battle and war using chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction too. The point is, each one of you has a piece of the vision that this civilization needs in order to stay alive, in order to be what it really is, an embryo, only now beginning to emerge from the womb, only now beginning to show the signs of babyhood and a toddlerhood beyond that. That's what this civilization is. Very, very new. Very new indeed. And each of you has the equivalent of a tile. Put all those tiles together and you get a mosaic. And you get a big picture. And that big picture of space as the paradise that awaits us, of space as the frontier that awaits us, to challenge us, to give us risk again, because risk is something we love. That's why people gamble here in Las Vegas, for a sense of personal control, because they control their bets, and for a sense of trying to beat death, beat risk. Well, we need to be able to tell our stories together. We need to be able to take all of the mosaic pieces that each of you contain, put them together into a big picture, and sell our asses off to the public. Because this is what they need to keep them alive and striving. It's what they need to keep moving ahead as a civilization. So what have I been doing about this? I'm a newcomer to this. I left space when I was 11 years old, or like that, and then was brought back by Feng to where I started. I've been trying to put together a 4-point program that everybody in this community can agree on, because it sums up what everyone is after. So point number 1, because this is a program that I want to be able to sell. When David said this morning, David Livingston, that we're not telling the story, that NASA's not telling the story, he means 2 things. We are not telling a narrative that excites people, and we're not giving them pictures that excite them. Pictures that just won't leave their minds. Step 1 in the 4-point plan is biofuels. Why biofuels? Because we're bankrupting our country. Technically, we are bankrupt. Our debts are so high that it's ridiculous. We have to start producing energy domestically. There are 100 companies currently involved in biofuels. Biofuels are going to happen with or without the people in this room. But biofuels are part of a bigger picture. They're what we need to hold us over for the next 15 years, create jobs in America, and stop the money leaking from our own pockets and get some of our own creativity going again. Brazil forced Ford Motor Company to invent something called the flex fuel vehicle, which can use either gasoline or biofuel, or any mixture of the two, because it's got a little processor that determines exactly what's in the tank and adjusts the engine accordingly. Brazil forced Ford to do this. Why not us? What's wrong with us? Well, the biofuels movement may or may not need us. We will have to see. So far, it's doing very well in its own publicity efforts. Step 2 in this consensus plan, and the ATG, the Aerospace Technologies and Working Group, which was kind enough to let me in a year ago, has signed on to biofuels as step 1 of a 4-point program. Step number 2 is space solar power, which is a highly contentious issue in this community. It was Paul Werbos at NSF who tried to convince me of the validity of space solar power, and I didn't believe him. I just didn't believe him. He was also the one who educated me about biofuels, and I didn't believe him either until I discovered that there are 5 million biofuel-capable cars on the roads of America today, and that America's 3 auto companies are turning out 36 models of biofuel vehicles. It's just that when they sell you one, they don't tell you it's a biofuel-capable vehicle, because they've made it in order to get around the CAFE standards. But that's a long story, why they've made it. When Feng decided to devote himself to space solar power, I have a profound belief in Feng. And between Feng and Paul Werbos, if they say it's doable, then it's doable. There's another thing. Try to sell, this morning, the big line was, let's sell the idea of settlement in space. I'm sorry, that's not a sellable concept right now. If you tell people, just come up with any line you want justifying why we should go to space, and you will get the following answer. Why are we spending these billions of dollars on space when we have homeless people in our streets, when we have poverty and starvation everywhere, and when war is going on all around us? You really seriously care so little about humanity that you want to take this money and throw it into the sky? I'm sorry, you don't deserve to live if that's what you want for humanity. That's the reaction you'll get. The fact is, if you tell people we have unlimited amounts of power available to us above our atmosphere, unlimited, the sun never stops shining. It's just the earth turning that makes it look dark from time to time. We can milk that energy. And that's energy that doesn't make us dependent on Arabs or Venezuelans or anyone else who wants to take our balls and twist them. That's energy that we can help power India, China, without carbon emissions, without pouring poisons into the atmosphere. It may be very costly in the beginning. It won't come out competitive with our standard sources of electricity, not by any stretch of the imagination. But hey, guess what? Things like the Transcontinental Railroad started out as hideously expensive propositions that couldn't possibly pay for themselves. Until people discovered that Daniel Webster was wrong when he said that the west coast of America was an utterly worthless piece of land, and that anybody who put any whatsoever didn't give a shit about humanity. Because if he cared about humanity, he'd care about the poor in Philadelphia. Did he turn out to be right about the West Coast and everything west of the Mississippi? He turned out to be dead wrong. Dead wrong. So the people in this room have all of the pieces in place to put together the bigger picture. Step 2 of the bigger picture is space solar power. The best way, Feng has told me, and it was announced this morning that it precedes Feng by 15 years, is the idea of building all of the material for space solar power on the moon, and then sending it into Earth orbit. Hey, what a great idea. We want to settle space and produce permanent space settlements. We don't have to sell it as permanent space settlements. What do people love? People love height. It gives them a sense of stature. It gives them a sense of confidence. A country that builds pyramids, that they built those pyramids between 2,500 and 3,500 years ago. And the Egyptians are still getting their source of pride and identity when they can't do anything but impoverish their own people out of the heights of those pyramids. Every people, from the folks in Babylon who built ziggurats to the folks, the mound builders of the Mississippi, has gotten its sense, stature, from the height of the things that it's been able to thrust into the sky. America got that sense in 1969 when we walked on the moon. Please don't repeat the moon program. I've seen it already. If America is in reruns, it has no future. So step 2 is space solar power. justifies colonizing space. If you're producing huge amounts of power up there and you're constantly producing new grids, you've got to have people up there living on a constant basis to make this industrial structure work, to make this power utility work. So step 3 is Rick Tumlinson's step, and the step of most of the people that I've met here the last 2 days. And that is the step of, let us mine the hell out of the resources of the moon and near-Earth asteroids. And that's how we're going to build the Space Solar Power Project. Because the Space Solar Power Project, energy is something everybody in America is vitally concerned about. Somehow, despite the horrors of waiting 2 miles and 2 hours in line in 1973 to get oil, we forgot how ghastly it was to be under the control of foreign countries that don't know how to make a damn thing. All they know how to do is collect the money from something somebody else has drilled for. It felt horrible and people forgot about it very rapidly. They've had it hit them again all over again. Oil was $78 a barrel as of yesterday. It may have gone up by now. I'm not sure. But the point is, after 2 major oil crises, this country finally seems to be ready for Jimmy Carter's message that we need the equivalent of a war, a moral war, a war for energy independence, a war of creativity, not a war of killing. That's why we can make headlines for our space projects, every one of them, by making space solar power a focus. People are guided toward height and they are guided toward light. And you focus them on something that has to do with sunshine and they are going to respond. Humans are heliotropic. They're celestophilic. They love the sky. And they're also driven by status needs. Status comes from the word for standing. Standing is defying gravity. Standing is all about height. Step 3 is industrialize the hell out of the raw materials on the moon. Now comes a fantasy that is a little, I can't say this is a consensus. Most of the points in this are consensus points. Points that have come from a large number of people within the space community. Well, I have this crazy vision, which I understand is not new and unique to me, of, hey, we're up on the moon, we're mining its industrial resources, the moon has material that can be turned into concrete, the moon has material that can be turned into glass. We have a problem with going all the way to Mars, with doing what Robert Zubrin wants, going directly to Mars, because we don't know how to shield ourselves from high energy particles in space. Well, guess what? Glass has been manufactured for a long time now in such a way as to defend against X-rays and other high energy particles. And the moon is made of the raw material of glass. So if we just take a lot of stuff off the surface of the moon, put it into lunar orbit and put it all together, we can make structures the size of 3 of these enormous hotels. We can make a structure big enough, says Ed, who was talking to us 2 hours ago, big enough for 10,000 people. And then all we have to do is put sparklers on one end of it, or put up big solar panels and little ion propulsion systems, and we can fly that sucker all the way to Mars. Now, people also love, in addition to height and light and status, people love, and not just people, all mammals love a feeling of control. A feeling of control keeps you healthy. It keeps your immune system working on high. It keeps your perceptual system working on high. Loss of control does the opposite. Your immune system dives, your internal system produces glucocorticoids, which are poisons, stress hormones, and your brain begins to be eaten away. You can't perceive even the simplest solution to problems around you. We need a sense of personal control. So what would I recommend once we get to Mars? Opening up the hangar doors, letting people have their own private landers, and letting them go by whether they want to go down by parachute or whether they want to use wings. That's up to them. But once they get to Mars, there's so much water on Mars. There's a limited amount of water to make fuel. On the moon, a very limited amount. But not Mars. 6 inches below the surface, the water starts. Which means that you can take your personal lander down to the surface of Mars, refuel, take off again, and if you're tired of Abbeville, let's call the first 10,000 person settlement that, and you know, settlements evolve. Settlements of human groups evolve as different from each other. So you're tired of Abbeville and you want to go to New York, which is another 10,000 capacity thing up there that happens to be momentarily in moon orbit. Fine. You've got personal control. What I would recommend for Bob Bigelow is this. Bob Bigelow has just put up the first motel room in space. It's 8 by 12. That's a standard room. It's not only 8 by 12, but you can float in it. Now, that means that the amount of territory available to you is double to triple what it is in a normal 8 by 12 room. And it's successfully unfolded its solar panels. What would I recommend that Bob Bigelow do? First of all, make sure that he makes his stuff out of as much transparent material as possible, because people do love light. They do not like to be canned. They don't like to be penned in and imprisoned. Secondly, if you started a gas station on a road in Nevada somewhere in 1940, and you installed slot machines, you would probably go out of business in the first year or two. But if instead of one building with slot machines, you have 30 buildings with slot machines, and instead of being the size of a gas station, those things are the size of this building, which is the size of a small town in reality, all of a sudden you have a social magnet. You have crowd power going for you. So where should Bob Bigelow put his first hotel? Next to the space station. So there's someplace else to go. What should he offer them as transportation to get back and forth from the space station? Their own personal little flying machines, which don't take much more than a canister of propane. It has to be computer controlled so that you can't go too low and get caught in the Earth's atmosphere, and you can't go too far out and become irretrievable, but he has to give you some personal control. That's the start. Then the next person who puts up a hotel, well, frankly, what I would recommend is just building a great big Gerard O'Neill dome, transparent, grow every kind of plant and animal that you can in it, and see after 4 generations what you can do with plants and animals, because they're going to start adapting and self-developing, in other words, self-selecting very rapidly. Because if I can offer you a ticket that takes you up to the space hotel, which none of your friends can afford, so that puts you ahead of everybody to begin with, and you can not only visit the space station and Bigelow's hotel, but you can go over and see the world's first non-gravity terrarium and see the weirdest plants you've ever seen in your life and some of the strangest animals you've ever seen in your life. Now we have the beginning of a tourist attraction. Now we have the beginning of an economy. So what I'm basically saying is, I'm trying to put together a consensus vision. Step 1, biofuels to tide us over until we have step 2, space solar power, which is built with step 3, material primarily from the moon, which gives us giant buildings. We can fly to Mars, which is step 4, Robert Zubrin's obsession. That's why I call this a consensus platform. It's built on the previous platforms that all of you in one way or another have been a part of. The next step is for us to get the funding to get what I call an action engine. The 8 or 9 best publicists you have ever seen on this planet. Because I know that in my 15 years of publicity, science was my but the fact is I could change people's perceptions radically if I knew a truth and knew the details down to the very last one and could tell a good story and leave people with a good picture in their mind. And that's what we need to do. We need to start selling the next horizon, and that's space. And we need to stop squabbling. Yes, we can do that in private, but we all have to agree on a common program, and we have to sell our asses off in every organization that we belong to get that program through, and every week there has to be a new headline about it. We have to have a standard against which we can measure our progress, so every week we can announce where we stand in our progress, so this becomes as regular a matter as reporting where the Dow is each day. And that's it. A vision, height, flight, control. Give people a story and show them where we are heading 200 years down the road. And they will follow. They will follow. That's it.
We can do about 5 minutes, Howard, if you want to do a couple. We have to keep it kind of short to get back on schedule.
Right. Yes, I've been trying to sell you on buying the first ticket the whole time. So.
You said you were going to talk about Willie Lay. What do you have to say about Willie?
Okay, Willie Lay, very simple. We're working on a multi-generational project here. We're not just working on something for the next 2 years or the next 5 years. We're working on something for the next 500 years. Now, Willie Lay was on his way. First of all, there was a guy named, I probably got his first name wrong, but Herman Oberth. And Oberth. And Herman Oberth was so captivated by Jules Verne's trip to the moon that he memorized the whole book. And then he came up with a much better way of getting into space than putting the fuel in a cylindrical thing and exploding it all at once and shooting guys into space. He came up with the idea of putting the fuel in the vehicle itself, which is an old idea. The Chinese had been doing it a long time before, and had been using rockets in 1500 as well. He wrote a book called By Rocket into Outer Space. At that point, Willie Lay was about 19 years old. He was in college, and he was going to become a paleontologist. He read Oberth's, I'll continue mispronouncing it, bear with me, but he read Oberth's book, and it did for him what I'm telling you we have to do for the entire American and Western public. It hit him like a thunderclap. And he went, paleontology, yeah, it's interesting, but it's nothing compared to this stuff. Well, Willie Lay and a guy named Wernher von Braun helped start the first rocket club in Germany. By the way, Oberth also came up with the idea of the two-stage rocket, but it was impractical at the time. And it's important to remember what's impractical because you know that people were laughing at him. Willie Lay and Wernher von Braun helped start the first rocket club in Germany. And then in 1933, a guy with a little mustache who looked like Charlie Chaplin managed to make it into power. And Willie Lay, being remarkably prescient, got out of Germany in 1935, only 2 years after Hitler took over. He came to the United States, and among other things, he acted as consultant. He wrote his own book about getting into space. He acted as consultant on a program called Tom Corbett Space Cadet. I saw Tom Corbett Space Cadet, and as a person who did not belong on the planet Earth, there was no place for me in Buffalo, New York, my hometown, none. As soon as I saw that show, having no idea it was Willie Lay, that show grabbed my heart and said, this is where you belong for the rest of your life, in science and in space. Willie Lay then got together with Wernher von Braun and suckered a guy named Chesley Bonestell into them. Chesley Bonestell had designed the entire facade of the Chrysler Building. He was a major, major designer. And they put together a series in Collier's magazine in 1951. This is called publicity. This is called giving people a vision. The pictures were what counted. Not the text, the pictures. The pictures were so persuasive that when Stanley Kubrick made 2001, his space station was the exact space station out of Collier's magazine. 1951. And these people managed to inspire this trio, Willie Ley, Werner von Braun, and Chesley, thank you, Bonestell, managed to inspire a congressman in his early 40s, who then became president and said, we are going to the moon, not because it is easy, not because we know how to do it, but because we don't know how to do it, because it's hard. So when people tell you any of the things we're talking about are impractical, remember how impractical Oberth's two-stage rocket was. And remember how impossible it was to find the technologies to actually go to the moon when that announcement was made in, what was it, 1962? The point of the story is each of us leaves a legacy. And the next generation climbs on that legacy, and the people in this room have the responsibility, again, of coming together on a consensus point of publicizing the shit out of them to leave the kind of legacy that made Willie Ley into a man who never stopped crusading for space, and then who brought me and many of you into the space movement too.
We're gonna have to stop.
Okay.
Thank you. Absolutely true. I urge you to talk over the next couple of days. Yeah, we got rockets to launch ourselves, and they're on the pad. So back to the room, folks. Thank you so much for attending our luncheon.